North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What is this all about? What do we do on this podcast? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not the news. It's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And so we debate. You can share your opinion and debate with me at 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm not exactly sure whether YouTube is carrying us again. They suspended us for 7 days, 14 days ago. Yeah, this is day number 14 of a 7-day suspension. Don't ask me exactly what's going on with YouTube. All I can tell you is that they are outside spec when it comes to what they do and their stated policies and so on and so forth, and I can't get in touch with them. I've been trying to figure out a way to come up with some kind of understanding as to whether or not I'll be able to broadcast on YouTube ever again. And at this particular moment, it looks like essentially I'm being shadow banned by YouTube, and there are 208 people that watch that broadcast every day. And I'm starting to get steamed. And I think that what we probably ought to do is we probably ought to figure out some way of how to get in touch with Google and or Facebook to try to get this taken care of. I'm reasonably sure that Google can do just fine without me on their platform, but what about the people? Yeah. What about the people that are actually there waiting for the broadcast? I mean, that's their customers, right? I mean, that's a group of their customers, as he tries to speak English. So what's going on with that? I don't know. But like I said, that's kind of navel gazing. Jessica Hamilton Kennedy says you should create a new channel called The Real Wells Report. Yeah, I guess. I just don't know. I don't know where to go from here. I'm confused. So if somebody can spend some quality time rattling YouTube's cage, I sure would appreciate it. Speaking of things rattling to disastrous outcomes, the death toll has surpassed 7,200. This across Turkey and Syria as the frantic search for survivors from two powerful earthquakes and a series of violent aftershocks continues for a second day. The Temblors toppled more than 6,000 buildings. In Turkey alone, more than 24,000 rescue workers, some from around the world, were picking through mammoth heaps of debris, seeking signs of life. This, by the way, from USA Today. We are facing one of the biggest disasters, not only of the history of the Turkish Republic, but of the world, said Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And amid the overwhelming tragedy, small victories were being won. In Kahramanmaraş, rescuers pulled concrete slabs away from Onur Doboglu, Dobuoglu. He's 25 years old, who had been trapped for 30 hours. Doboglu was taken by ambulance to the hospital with a fractured foot and arms. Rescue team member Turgut Dolanbey told the Turkish Anadolu News Agency that the team focused on the site after hearing Doboglu call out. His uncle, Sefa Gedik, hugged rescuers after reuniting him with his nephew. May Allah help everyone. We wish everyone to be saved, said Gedik. 380,000 survivors have taken refuge in government shelters and hotels, this according to Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay. More than a dozen people faced investigation for alleged provocative earthquake social media postings that authorities had tried to foment fear and panic in local media. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani said one Italian businessman, Angelo Zen from Venice, was missing in Turkey. Family members have said they believe Zen had traveled into the quake area. Christian Atsu, a former striker with Chelsea and Newcastle in British Premier League, was successfully rescued from the rubble of the collapsed building is receiving treatment. This, according to the Ghana Football Association. Atsu is 31 years old. He signed with the Turkish team last year. Turkish Airlines said it shuttled 80 flights with almost 12,000 volunteers into the earthquake zone in southern Turkey. That happened today. CEO Bilal Eksi said that flights would continue as long as necessary. This was incredibly beautiful and heartening information. Residents digging through a collapsed building in northwest Syria discovered a crying infant whose mother appears to have given birth to her while buried beneath the rubble. The newborn girl's umbilical cord was still connected to her mother, Afra Abu Hidayah, who died in the building collapse. Oh. The baby was the only member of her immediate family to survive the small town of Cinderis, next to the Turkish border. Ramadan Sleiman, a relative, told Associated Press the physician, Hani Maruf, examined the baby and estimated the baby was born several hours before being found, given the amount of her temperature had dropped. Had the girl been left for an hour more, she would have died. California and Turkey are not that drastically different when it comes to earthquakes, except that they would be more frequent in California, said Robert Muir-Wood, a chief research officer at the risk management firm Moody's RMS. Earthquakes in Turkey are big, principally strike-slip on a broad plate boundary. Do you know what that means? Me neither. Faults move horizontally are known as strike-slip faults. So that would mean that these plates on the San Andreas Fault, the continental plate is folding under the San Andreas Fault. The idea that California could break off and fall into the ocean it's exactly the opposite. The Pacific plate is rising over the top of the continental plate. So that's where and every time these places get stuck in California, pressure builds until they give up, and then there's an earthquake. This is a strike-slip fault. In other words, the plates are moving this way. So what would happen is like this part of my knuckle impacts this part of my knuckle, they lock this way, and then they slip. Earthquake residential insurance penetration in Turkey is higher than in California, but building code compliance is much better in California. This is something, all these buildings, 6,000 buildings have collapsed in this particular area. Why? Because they don't demand better building techniques. They don't create buildings that can handle an earthquake. And that's why we have all this amazing loss of life. So such earthquakes should be at least twice as common in California. David Oglesby, a seismologist and professor of geophysics at the University of California, Riverside, pointed out the notorious San Andreas Fault that crosses most of the state from north to south is also of the strike-slip variety. Oglesby said buildings collapsed in a major earthquake are less of a danger in California than objects falling on people. He cited a 2008 study by the U.S. Geological Survey that estimated a magnitude 7.8 earthquake like Monday's would cause more than 1,800 deaths, 1,500 injuries, and about $200 billion in damage if it struck in Southern California. Downtown Los Angeles is built on a basin filled with soft sediment that would act like a bowl full of jello in a big earthquake. It's not a matter of if, but when a quake roughly this size hits Southern California. People need to be taking precautions and being prepared. Turkish Energy and National Resources Minister Fatih Dönmez said the quakes inflicted severe damage on electricity and natural gas transmission and distribution lines. State pipeline operator BOTAS and major power supplier Energisa said they were examining and repairing damage around the clock under very difficult weather and terrain conditions. It's a tough winter there. Some repair work has been completed. Other regions were not supplied with power for safety reasons. In Turkey's southernmost Hatay province, the Daily Sabah reported that 16-year-old girl was rescued after being trapped under the debris of a 5-story building for nearly 22 hours. 5 more survivors were found in the downtown Antakya district nearly 30 hours after the 7.8 magnitude quake. Rescue teams also dug out 4 other people in 2 separate nearby wreckages. A few hours later, the team extricated a mother and 2 daughters alive from under a building. Crews rescued from another wreckage a child and his big sister, and rescuers said they heard their cries of "I'm scared, I can't get out" as workers rushed to free them. In northwest Syria, the quake leveled towns in a region already under siege. Millions of people have already been displaced by a civil war that has dragged on for more than a decade. The quake death toll in Syria has exceeded 1,450, is expected to rise. Sanctions made rebuilding difficult amid the fighting. The task just became even more daunting. Khaled Hubati, head of the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, appealed to lift the siege and economic sanctions imposed on Syria. We need heavy equipment, ambulances, firefighting vehicles to continue rescue and removing the rebel. And this entails lifting sanctions on Syria as soon as possible, said Bubadi. Our volunteers are ready, but we lack equipment. And so that is the very latest coming out of Syria, at least as far as USA Today is concerned. There is CNN also reports that this is one of the deadliest earthquakes in the past 20 years. Turkey and Syria are reeling. Death toll continues to climb. 7,200 people, more than 7,200 people already reported dead across the two countries. In comparison with other large earthquakes around the world, in 2011, the Japanese quake and tsunami, which more than 22,000 people were killed or went missing, registered a startling magnitude of 9.1. That incident left widespread destruction in the wake after walls of water engulfed entire towns, dragged houses into the highways, caused the country's worst nuclear disaster on record, at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. A year before, in 2010, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake in Haiti is estimated to have killed between 220 and 300,000 people. A further 300,000 people were injured, millions were displaced. In 2004, an earthquake with an estimated magnitude of 9.1 struck the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, causing a tsunami that left 227,898 people dead or listed as missing and presumed dead. The strongest earthquake on record was a magnitude 9.5 in Chile in 1960. This, according to the United States Geological Survey. 9.5. In case you're wondering, let's see, it would be. Let's see. This is reported to be a 7.8. Okay, 7.8. So an 8.8 would be 1,000 times more powerful than a 7.8. A 9.8, 9.5 would be close to another 1,000 times more powerful than that. These are exponential, these ratings. So when you start thinking about the Earth moving, you start thinking about just the amazing disaster that all of this is, and Turkey and Syria are fighting with it even as we speak. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I want to thank you very much for being with us today. We've got a chat room. We're going to go there next. Thanks very much for joining us on Tuesday on the Wells Report. Don't forget, our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. We'll try to figure out exactly what's going on with YouTube and try to figure out why they are having a 7-day suspension that has now lasted 14. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Back to the Turkish-Syrian earthquake. A military prison is located in the town of Rajo. That's near the Turkish border. It holds about 2,000 inmates. 1,300 of them are suspected members of ISIS. The prison also holds fighters from Kurdish-led forces. That must be a nice mix. After the earthquake struck, Rajo was affected and inmates started to mutiny, took control of parts of the prison, said the official at the Rajo jail, which is controlled by pro-Turkish factions. 20 prisoners fled who are believed to be ISIS group militants. The 7.8 magnitude quake, which was followed by dozens of aftershocks in the region, caused damage to the prison, with walls and doors cracking. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights War Monitor said it could not verify whether prisoners had escaped, but did confirm there was a mutiny. At least 1,444 people died across Syria after the devastating earthquake had its epicenter in southwestern Turkey, this according to government and rescue personnel. In rebel-held parts of the country's northwest, at least 733 people were killed, more than 2,100 injured. This according to the White Helmets Rescue Group. The incident in Rajo comes on the heels of an ISIS attack in December on a security complex in their former de facto Syrian capital of Raqqa, which was aimed at freeing fellow jihadists from a prison there. 6 members of the Kurdish-led security forces that control the area were killed in the foiled assault. The conflict in Syria started in 2011 with a brutal repression of peaceful protests and escalated to pull in foreign powers and global jihadists. Nearly 500,000 people have been killed. The conflict has forced around half the country's pre-war population from their homes, with many seeking refuge in Turkey. That, by the way, from France 24, one of the news agencies of France, as we go around the world looking for the news. Taking a look at the chat board, Jessica says, "Wow, it's awful. I've seen a lot of kids rescued, but few adults. Yeah, this is a very serious disaster here." Let's see. Jessica also says, "Happy birthday, JD." Thank you very much, Ms. Jessica. I appreciate that. Let's see what else is going on. Who's going to try to watch the State of the Union address tonight? I'm going to try, says Eddie Jones. I am too. As a matter of fact, I'll probably do a special broadcast of the State of the Union address here on the Wells Report, a special edition of the Wells Report later on tonight. Let's see. The San Andreas Fault is a strike slip fault. Yeah, for some reason I'm very, very sure that the Pacific Plate is coming up on top of the continental plate. I don't know that that's correct. I'm very sure that that situation where the Pacific Plate rises on top of, and so it's like a strike slip plate is this way, and the San Andreas Fault is like this. I don't know what that geologist is doing, but he's the guy. He's the professional. So there you go. Let's see. The death toll is going to rise for days. That's absolutely true. Lois Floyd asks if this is the show for the 7th day of February, year of our Lord 2023. It is. Absolutely. Gary Olivier points out that I am wearing a shirt from the John David Wells collection. We were out on a deployment of some kind together, Gary Olivier and I. And we went to Walmart. No, we went to Kohl's because we didn't have enough civilian clothing. So we went to Kohl's and I picked out a couple of shirts for him, and he's been calling it the J.D. Wells collection ever since. This is the shirt I purchased there. I really like it a lot, actually. Let's see what else. F YouTube. Well, I would like to know. Listen, if they want to throw the Wells Report off, that's fine. I'd like to know so I can move on. Find someplace else that actually is interested in following the First Amendment. By the way, Gary points out he has his J.D. Wells collection shirt on too. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The Chinese balloon falderall is continuing to amaze, mystify, annoy the military command in charge of U.S. air defenses. Reports today that they failed to detect suspected Chinese surveillance balloons before the recent intrusion and learned about them later from intelligence agencies. They also learned about them apparently from people in Montana. By the way, the general overseeing the command said that there was a gap in their defenses. You think? General David Van Herk, make that Glenn Van Herk, the commander of NORTHCOM and North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, contrasted these previous lapses in detecting balloons with the airship the military tracked and shot down over the weekend. He described a surveillance gap and said the U.S. is trying to determine why the earlier flights went undetected. I will tell you, we did not detect those threats. There's a domain awareness gap. A domain awareness gap. Okay, in case you don't know what a domain awareness gap is, it's called a blind spot. A blind spot. Yeah. By the way, in case you're wondering, the general said the U.S. took countermeasures to prevent the balloon from collecting intelligence, studied the craft as it traversed the U.S. last week, and hoped to learn more about its capabilities from the wreckage. Efforts continued for a third day to recover debris from the balloon in coastal waters off South Carolina. Crews retrieved pieces of equipment that the balloon carried. Biden administration officials have identified the last 4 previous flights by Chinese surveillance balloons above the continental U.S. that went undetected until after leaving American airspace. The Wall Street Journal reported over the weekend, again, this on Sunday. 3 of those flights occurred in the Trump administration, while 1 took place early in the Biden administration, which begs the question, how come the Trump administration was not briefed on these overflights? The lapses I'm discussing have underscored concerns about the robustness of U.S. and Canadian ground-based radars to identify aerial threats, the primary mission of the joint U.S.-Canada organization that NORTHCOM, that General Van Herk oversees. That's also known as NORAD. Not only did the intelligence community assess those incursions from additional means and made us aware of those balloons that were previously approaching North America or in transit in North America, said Van Herk. National Security Council Strategic Coordinator John Kirby told reporters yesterday, the administration learned of the past incursions after Mr. Biden took office, though it was known that China operated a surveillance balloon program. Quote, "We certainly came into office aware the Chinese were continuing this program of spy balloons. We were trying to improve this military capability. We continue to try to improve its own understanding of that capability and Chinese intentions," unquote. The top Trump administration officials told the Journal they were not aware of the alleged incidents. The Biden administration offered to brief former senior members of the Trump administration on their findings. The U.S. official said the Chinese surveillance balloon program has been in existence between 12 and 15 years. Meanwhile, Florida Representative Mike Waltz said on Twitter that he had been informed by the Office of the Secretary of Defense that several Chinese balloon incidents have happened in recent years, including over Florida. It wasn't immediately clear when those alleged incidents occurred. All I can say is that, okay, so why didn't President Trump get briefed on any of this? Can it possibly be that you can fly a balloon into American airspace without it being detected? You do realize, of course, that this balloon could probably carry a nuclear warhead, right? And we can't track these? Is that what we're saying here? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think what's happening is that somebody's falling on their sword here. They've got a big problem. They have a big problem. There hasn't been any way of entering American airspace with anything since the late 50s. There is no way that this is true. No way. There is no way that there could be an aircraft of any kind that would enter American airspace unauthorized, without being seen. It's just not possible. And so, what are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with some sort of cover up? I'm sorry, but, so Biden says this, and everybody says, my God, President Biden is a jerk. Look at what he's doing. He can't do anything right, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody comes out and says, well, this happened during the Trump administration. So that blows up all the outrage over President Biden blowing it. Trump administration officials come up and say, we didn't know anything about it. The implication is that either they didn't happen, those overflights didn't happen, or the people that actually were responsible for making sure that anything that crosses into American airspace is tracked, identified, and if necessary, shot down, apparently did not brief the Trump administration on this finding. That, of course, would be an egregious violation of military regulations with regards to reports to the commander-in-chief about a matter of national security. So now what we're saying is that NORAD couldn't figure out exactly what was going on with American airspace. When this spy package could have easily been a nuclear warhead. You've got to be kidding me. So all the billions and trillions and gazillions that we spent on all of these amazing launch vehicles to send nuclear weapons from one end of the earth to the other, really, we only need a hot air balloon? Okay, it's helium, but you're beginning to understand why I'm just a little bit annoyed by all of this. Okay, so this is the latest video coming out of the recovery of the said balloon. How many hundreds of billions of dollars did we spend on the B-2 bomber? And you only need a freaking balloon? Are you kidding? All right, so here is the video. This from ABC News, courtesy of the U.S. Department of Defense. You can see that apparently there is the essential envelope of helium. That's what they're working with here. Those very cool crew boats that they have. It was estimated to be about 150 feet tall. The debris field, 15 football fields. They say the balloon had propellers and a rudder. That's interesting. So it was steerable. The U.S. had no plans to return any of the fragments of the balloon. There are stories about that, by the way, in case you're wondering. Parts will be brought to Quantico for the FBI lab to look at for further analysis. This, according to a government official. All right. So what you can see here is you can see that there are an awful lot of red faces that are around the country regarding this. And once again, I am reasonably sure, I said so last night, that there is no possible way that a vehicle of any kind can enter American airspace unidentified. And so on and so on. Let's see. Let me go back to the chat room here. Jube says it succinctly. Here, let me get my camera over here. Jube says it succinctly. Jube Dankworth, the publicist of the Wells Report, can't believe anything they say. No, you can't. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene wants an investigation as to why President Trump was not notified to see who hid it from the administration. Yeah, that's a big problem there. The payload is said to reach 1.2 tons. So, yeah, I don't think that we've had a nuclear warhead, or anybody on the planet has had a nuclear warhead that weighs more than like 500 pounds, for probably 3 decades. Let's see. Mr. Love 825 says Trump officials are not being honest. In other words, they're lying about the fact that there were Chinese overflights. As leaky as the Trump administration was, do you believe that if there were Chinese overflights of anything into the United States, that it wouldn't be splattered all over the front page of the New York Times? The answer is, of course, it would have been. I mean, they tried to say that Trump knew all about it. It happened during the Trump administration, just moments, and that lasted about half a day before people said, oh, wait a minute, that's a mistake. And it was the Biden administration, the same Pentagon officials that said, well, we found out about it after President Trump left office, which opens up the can of worms as, okay, why wasn't President Trump briefed on this? Which takes us back to the deep state, which takes us back to various generals having to do with the United States government under the Trump administration trying to stop President Trump from being the president and commander-in-chief of the United States. Yeah, this gets really nasty really fast. And then Mr. Love says, well, they could have known and did nothing. No, that would not have happened. Can you imagine what would have happened in the United States media if somebody in Montana had taken a picture of a Chinese balloon, or in Texas, or in Florida, and sent it to CNN? Can you imagine what would have happened? Whoa. Surely our military is more competent than that. I figured they had it tracked and jammed the entire time and just intercepted the information they would have tried to transmit, or at least they better have been. They would never tell us what they actually did. True. Which is why they waited until it was over water before they shot it down. I am reasonably sure that if indeed one of the things about a lighter than air craft is the envelope that makes it lighter than air is usually over the top of the payload. Normally, communications between, say, for example, a spy package of that nature is done by laser to a satellite. That probably may not have happened. If it was indeed radio, they could have very easily determined what frequency or set of frequencies, because it's likely frequency agile. In other words, it bounces very, very quickly through a bunch of frequency ranges. It's very, very hard to track, et cetera, et cetera. It's also very hard to jam, but they probably jammed it, so the Chinese probably didn't get much information from it. How do I know what Trump knew 2 years ago? The balloons were over Texas and Florida. Once again, one of the things that you don't have to worry about with the Trump administration was them being able to hide anything from a mainstream media that was trying to remove him from office, or the entire United States intelligence agencies and the United States military. All of these guys would have leaked anything that they could have possibly leaked to embarrass Donald Trump. And they didn't do it. You got to use your brain. You know, there's logic here. There is logic. How do I know that what Trump knew 2 years ago? I guarantee you a couple of different things would have happened. First of all, Donald Trump would have splattered it all over wherever he found it, the countryside, what have you, and then he would have levied another $500 million worth of trade sanctions against China. And he would have also been called incompetent for being able to not defend American airspace. Believe me, the American media would have known about it. Let's see, the balloon did not say made in China. No, China said it was made in China. By the way, this is kind of interesting. Back in the late 60s and through the 70s, there was an operation called Ivy Bells. If you read the book Blind Man's Bluff, they pretty much tell you what happened. What happened is that the United States submarine service went into the Sea of Okhotsk and found a telephone cable and put beside it a piece of equipment that listened in on the cable and recorded everything that was transmitted through the cable. There were several missions going back to the Sea of Okhotsk. Whatever. That particular, I used to be able to pronounce it. Anyway, the simple case of the matter is they would go in and they would download all of the recordings out of this pod. Well, eventually what ended up happening was there was a serious storm. It's a very stormy sea, and it picked up the USS Halibut, which was a submarine that was in the area, picked it up and set it back down on the cable, which sent a whole bunch of static through it. And they said, well, there's something wrong with the cable. The Russians then went out, traced the cable, and found this capsule that was sitting beside it. On the inside of it were all of these black data plates that had all kinds of information about the United States manufacturers that had created this thing, the various defense contractors, and so on and so forth. It's in a Russian museum right now. It was a famous espionage thing. So yeah, the Chinese claimed it. And oh, by the way, there's an interesting little story about them claiming it that I'll bring to you in just a couple of moments. Who would entertain the thought that officials would keep this information from a guy they had to talk out of nuking a hurricane? More about that in a moment. This is the Wells Report. Back in a second. You stay right where you are. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. You can certainly, by the way, join us on the chat room, which is flying. This is on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. Used to be on YouTube, but for whatever reason, YouTube has suspended us. They suspended us for 7 days, 14 days ago. I don't get it. Chris Grimes said something right before the break. Who would ever entertain the thought that officials of the United States Department of Defense would keep information away from Donald Trump, who once proposed the idea of nuking a hurricane? Chris, that idea of nuking hurricanes that came out of the science community 60 years ago. It's a viable alternative when you think about it. You know, strangely, what people don't understand about nuclear weapons is that mostly what they come up with is heat. There are some very short-lived radiation, neutrons, et cetera, which, by the way, would be all but absorbed by water. And the amount of actual nuclear fallout would be almost zero after blowing a hurricane to smithereens. If you don't believe me, what I want you to do is I want you to go and look at a YouTube video, strangely enough, YouTube video of Castle Bravo. That was a nuclear explosion in the Marianas Islands that literally moved the atmosphere around. You can see it. It was amazing. And yeah, it would take out a hurricane. There would be no doubt about it. So anyway, if you believe in following the science, well, when President Trump brought that up, he was actually following the science, in case you don't know. Let's see. I'm sure, Mr. Love says, I'm sure there are thousands of secrets that have not been revealed, probably too many. I believe that the United States government hides an awful lot of stuff, saying that it's all about national security when they really don't need to. I think things are overclassified for political effect. And while most of us really didn't think about that too much as being too real before the deep state era, following the deep state era, there's no doubt about it. What these people are doing is simply clapping highly classified ratings on pieces of information they don't want out because they don't want to be embarrassed. Let's see, what else? Chinese balloons. Yeah, we've been talking about, let's see. Put forward, yes, I did that. Laugh, separate but equal. We know, okay, Pablo Reagan. State of the Union tonight, I'll probably be grabbing it. Yeah, I'm sure that Trump read all the science history when he made that suggestion. Actually, he was around when it was made, just like I was. I happen to remember them talking about it. That's how I was able to get the information, because I knew what I was searching for, because I'd seen it before. I have no need to waste my time listening to a doddering fool lie for however long. I'd rather have a root canal. Yeah, I want you to know that in a lot of different ways, a lot of what I do on this broadcast to cover the news is an act of love. It absolutely is an act of love to actually listen to all this stuff. But I got to be honest with you, I said that I was going to report the news. And so wherever the news goes, that's where I go. And people are saying, okay, how come you didn't cover the January 6th committee? That wasn't news. That wasn't news. That was propaganda. And the reason it was propaganda was very simple. Just very, very simple. There was absolutely zero exculpatory evidence being presented by the January 6th committee that I knew was there. There were 800 people arrested, but there were 15,000 people on the Capitol grounds. What were those people doing? Do you have any idea? The answer is a whole lot of nothing is what they were doing. That wasn't a part of any presentation by the January 6th committee. And by the way, we still haven't figured out what happened to Ashley Babbitt. And so they don't want to go back into this. But the thing about it is that I didn't cover that because it wasn't news. It was partisan muckraking. It was a lynch mob, and that's why I didn't cover it. I even explained it over and over and over here. When there was news coming out of the January 6th committee, I reported it. But I do report the news here, and I will very likely, I don't think there's anything standing in the way of tonight's schedule, so I will very likely probably be doing a special broadcast of the Wells Report covering the State of the Union address. Hopefully you might like it. So there you go. By the way, I was talking about this a couple of seconds ago. Man, you got to hand it to the Chinese. They have got some brass. They really do. The People's Republic of China is requesting the return of its surveillance aircraft after the balloon was shot down over the continental U.S. on Saturday. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning fielded questions about the incident, which dominated news cycles, commanded attention from U.S. politicians. Asked for additional information regarding the purpose of the spy balloon and reports of similar aircraft making routes through North America, Mao declined to comment. The Chinese side has given information about the unmanned airship on several occasions. I don't have anything to add at this moment. The Pentagon said it acted immediately to protect against the collection of sensitive information from the spy platform. Geopolitical experts said there's little reason to believe those efforts were successful, as the balloon almost certainly transferred surveillance data to China as it flew over several military bases. There's not anything on those military bases that the Chinese don't already know. They want their balloon back. Request denied. Yeah, that's going to not ever go back to China ever again. If you don't like that, stop sending them over our country. Hour number 2's next on the Wells Report. All right, my friends, that's hour number 1. That went fast. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do we do on the Wells Report? I'm glad you asked that question, especially if you're new. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary, but that's not the news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. So we debate. So it's news, analysis, commentary, and debate. That is the Wells Report, and it's awfully good to have you here today. Let's see, what else? I'm just keeping... Oh, yeah. We've been talking about the Chinese balloon thing for the last little bit of the Wells Report. If you missed the first hour, go back and watch it. Pretty good hour, actually. That's funny. We were talking about that, and we were talking about the Chinese wanting their balloon back. And Gary Olivier, my brother and fellow first sergeant in the Texas State Guard, said, charge them for the missile and the cleanup cost. Yeah, absolutely. You know, everybody's saying, why is it that we allow the Chinese to continue committing espionage in the United States in all kinds of different ways? How do we stop them from doing it? It's real simple. It's absolutely simple. What you do is you tie all of their espionage thefts to the amount of money they have invested in the United States. Last I heard, it was somewhere around $13 trillion. You know, if you were to take an awful lot of, say, for example, the technology that has been stolen from the United States by both Russia and by China and started charging them for it, they'd stop stealing it. They really would. I was looking up the development costs of the W-88 warhead, and when I stopped adding things to it, you know, all of the computer simulations and all the hardware and all the experimentation and so on and so forth, when it crossed $100 billion, I said, you know, that's probably, and that's just one thing. What about all the information of all the United States, all the government employees of the United States of America that they stole out of a database from the United States government? That's probably worth another, I don't know, $400 or $500 billion. You add all that stuff up, and what you do is you say, okay, so you got the W-88 warhead, you got the Delta booster, you got all that information, you've got the computer technology to allow you to simulate nuclear design, construction, building, and explosive force all inside of a computer. I would say that it comes out to $5 or $10 trillion. So instead of owing you $13 trillion in government bonds, we now only owe you, let's say, $8 trillion. You know, they'd stop stealing stuff from us if we started charging them for it. Just saying. Okay. Anyway, I thought that was a good point. Let's see what else. It was just pictures. China can get that from satellites. This balloon collected other data, I'm sure, plus give China the knowledge of what our response was to it. Yeah. And apparently, according to somebody at NORAD, the North American Aerospace Command, apparently they've done this before and we didn't even notice, which is garbage. It's absolute garbage. But this tells you how serious the problem is politically. If the problem is so serious politically that the way to handle it is by telling us, all of us in the United States, that the United States military that we've spent trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars for can't track a balloon floating across the United States at 20 miles an hour. Well, actually, in the jet stream, it'd be a little faster. Okay, I'm just kidding. Anyway, we can't track literally a helium balloon across the United States. If that was the story that they're trying to tell to get us out of trouble, I'm sorry, a nation that's $32 trillion in national debt, that we've overspent the budget by $32 trillion, doesn't have a military that can track a bird flying from one end of the country to the other? Are you kidding? Anyway, like I said, this is we've entered an enlightened new age of craziness when politicians, when they're trying to do something that is just plain criminal against a sitting president that they don't approve of. Yeah, they put so many cards on the table that need to be played. The only thing that's going to stop them from being absolutely barbecued over this for the next 10 or 15 years is the fact the Republican Party doesn't have the balls to do something with it, which is why I'm no longer a Republican. You know, you got to fight for this nation, and Republicans don't fight for anything. I'm sorry, if you're a Republican and that kind of tweaks you a little bit, find a better political party, because these guys are losers. President Joe Biden is going to try to convince a divided Congress that Democrats and Republicans can work together when he delivers the second State of the Union address tonight. Fighting the opioid epidemic, improving mental health, supporting veterans, and cutting cancer death rates will top that agenda. Facing dim prospects for major legislative wins, the USA Today says that a looming showdown over the federal budget and a GOP House investigating his administration and family. Biden will tout his successes and lay out new proposals. Look for bipartisanship to be a recurring theme as he touches on the economy, the war in Ukraine, immigration, and other issues. The speech before a joint session of Congress will serve as a prelude to President Biden's likely re-election bid in 2024, a bid that 75% of Americans don't want him to engage in. The First Lady will have a few State of the Union guests. Brandon Say and his mother and stepfather, the mother and stepfather of Tyree Nichols, will attend as guests of Jill Biden. House GOP investigations are ramping up. House Republicans have begun a plethora of probes, fancy alliteration there, huh? Into President Biden and his circle, including a look at Hunter Biden's art. Let's see. Embattled Representative George Santos will be bringing a former 9/11 volunteer firefighter as his guest to the State of the Union. A former U.S. Capitol police officer described what he believed to be a near-death experience while protecting the Capitol from rioters on January 6, 2021. That in testimony during the Proud Boys sedition trial last week. Mark Ode, who was part of the Capitol Police Civil Disturbance Unit on January 6th, testified while attempting to hold a police line. Rioters simultaneously pushed him to the ground and sprayed him with an unknown chemical substance. He fell on his stomach. The rioters piled on top of him. I was incapable of moving most of my limbs, including my legs. I thought I would not make it out alive if I didn't make it out of that pile. He said he was struggling to breathe because his face mask trapped the chemicals and the rioters were using his helmet strap to choke him. An officer behind him urged him to stand up before grabbing his leg and pulling him out of the pile. President Joe Biden is sharpening his focus on the internet's effect on young people heading into his second half of his first term, according to the White House, as part of his ongoing unity agenda. Okay. I'm going to break from the news to give you an opinion. President Biden could not have possibly been more divisive. Cannot possibly expect to repair the divisive aspects of his rhetoric in the first 2 years of his presidency with one speech tonight. That's absolute bogus crap. He called half of the people of the United States domestic terrorists. He called half the people of the United States degenerate bigots. He can't possibly back away from that. And even if he tries to back away from that, nobody is going to believe him. I'm not going to believe him. I'm sorry, but there is a strict and stern price that comes with the idea of calling me a bigot and actually meaning it. I just won't have anything to do with you. I won't have anything to do with you. There's no reason for me to even entertain a discussion about it. And so that happened over and over again. And call me a domestic terrorist? Excuse me? Call me a domestic terrorist. I've got about, probably 2,000-3,000 hours A video that I would really like you to take a look at from the summer of 2020 before you call me a domestic terrorist. No, I'm sorry, Mr. President. The idea of trying to patch up unity and this idea of bipartisanship, in my view, just my opinion, not the news, just my opinion, is garbage. Absolute garbage. Unless you believe that unity and bipartisanship is the Republican Party just knuckling under and doing anything the Democrats want. And oh, by the way, the people of the United States that either support the Republican Party or still call themselves Republicans are getting extremely frustrated with the Republican Party's inability to fight for this nation. And they have a dramatic inability to fight for this nation. And somebody is going to. Believe me, if you happen to be in the Democrat power structure in any way, shape, or form, you really do want to deal with a fighting Republican Party as opposed to a fighting American public. Getting back to the State of the Union preview, President Biden is going to throw out what he calls a unity agenda. He'll call for Congress to ban targeted online advertising for youth and enact strong protections for their online privacy, safety, and mental health. Sort of like the strong protections for online protection and safety and mental health of, say, for example, a propagandist agenda that they did by quashing the mainstream or the social media giants did by quashing conservative ideology on their platforms throughout the run up to the 2020 election. Somebody had to say it. President has put out this. We know that too many Americans continue to struggle, especially young people, where mounting evidence indicates social media and other tech platforms can be harmful to mental health and well-being and development. Yeah, okay. The Biden administration's fresh focus on technology's impact on young people comes as Congress considers bipartisan legislation that would ban social media app TikTok, which more than 2/3 of young people use. The Biden administration will launch a national campaign to educate young people on the dangers of fentanyl, part of the forceful approach for going after fentanyl trafficking and reducing overdose deaths. Once again, the President of the United States could do both of those things simply by closing the border. Why doesn't he? Well, because the government of the United States is complicit about that open border. The government of the United States is complicit in keeping the border open. And there are only 4 reasons for you to want to do that. You're a consumer of or a proponent of human trafficking, the sex trade. You're a consumer of or a proponent of the illegal drug trade. You are a proponent of bringing in terrorists from around the world across the southern border, or you're getting paid by a cartel. So once again, can somebody explain to me why the border is open? Since those are the only 4 reasons that it would be. Back with more in a moment. This is me speaking without turning my microphone up. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Going to the chat room, available on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. The president has no idea what he's saying. I believe that to a degree, some of that is true. We'll see. Let's see. Mr. Love was reacting to me saying that he called half of the United States bigots and domestic terrorists. He called out everybody who voted for Donald Trump. Several times, in fact. Calling us bigots and domestic terrorists. You can't hide from that one. You simply can't hide from that one. He says, not half. He called out MAGA Republicans. They're different than Republicans like Liz Cheney or George Will. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Did Republicans like Liz Cheney or George Will vote for President Trump? The answer is no. They did not vote for President Trump. Republicans like Liz Cheney or George Will did not vote for President Trump. Therefore, the people that President Biden is talking about are people who did vote for President Trump. And it was outrageous. It was outrageous on its face. It was infuriating. It was despicable. And it continues to be despicable. And the same guy that is throwing all this despicable garbage out there is now saying we need a unity and bipartisanship and blah, 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 blah. Out of the question. Out of the question. And go ahead, run for re-election. Run for re-election. If you break 60 million votes, it'll be the most amazing, elective achievement in history. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. The same type of speech that Trump gave in Minnesota about liberals. I can't imagine him calling liberals bigots and domestic terrorists. Why don't you find that speech for me, Mr. Love? Why don't you find the speech where he called the liberals that you're talking about, liberals and progressives, domestic terrorists? Find that for me, will you? I'd appreciate it. Let's see. Then he said ultra MAGA and MAGA. Have you noticed something about the term MAGA? By the way, I'm interacting with people on the chat room. If you want to, you can, or you can call me at 817-379-2172. Have you noticed something about that? Have you noticed that MAGA has become a term that is separate from what it stands for? It's an acronym for Make America Great Again. There are an awful lot of people that sneer the word MAGA out there, but it's Make America Great Again. So they're sneering about making America great again? Is that what they're doing? You know what they're actually doing? They're actually following a famous liberal garbage about trying to dehumanize people who believe that America should be a constitutional republic. And they're using the term MAGA as a term of art that distorts what it actually means. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead and you can't defend it. It's indefensible. Sometimes you just got to say, yeah, that was a mistake. Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it, Mr. Love 825. Yeah, you know what? When he said that stuff, it was a mistake. Yeah, it was a mistake. By the way, we'll talk a little bit more about what we're talking about here coming up in just a couple of seconds. It's a run-up to the State of the Union address. We'll have that. The Trump defense in full display. There's no need to defend truth. You need to defend propaganda and lies. And you can't, can you? It's not about Trump defense. It's about attacks against people who supported the other side. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. We were just giving you live updates on the upcoming State of the Union address from USA Today. Fox News has one of those things going, and you can see the bias for yourself. I will share some of that information with you because we do point out bias no matter where it comes from. President Biden, by the way, this is from Fox News, and it is biased. President Biden is heading into the State of the Union tonight, plagued by negative approval ratings. That's how they lead their update. According to Real Clear Politics polling average, President Biden currently has a 44% approval rating among Americans. That compared to a 52% disapproval. 538 offered similar findings, putting Biden at 43% approval compared to 52% disapproval. According to both sources, Biden has not had an approval rating in the green since August of 2021. President Biden hit his lowest approval rating in July of 2022 with a staggering 57% disapproval. The public dissatisfaction came amid record gas prices and wild spikes of inflation. President Biden is expected to call for unity and cooperation between Republicans and Democrats in the State of the Union tonight, despite continued friction with the GOP. White House officials told the press in a call today that President Biden will be announcing new policies in his unity agenda that was first unveiled in last year's speech. As I can say, that is a dead-on-arrival idea. His rhetoric has just been far too divisive and far too hurtful to far too many people for far too long for him to try to pull this off. I'm surprised he's even giving it a shot. I don't understand this. The unity agenda focuses on key issues the Biden administration believes can be addressed across party lines. The opioid epidemic. No, the opioid epidemic cannot be dealt with across party lines because the best way to stop it in its tracks is to close the border. The president does not want to close the border. Now, remember, there are only 4 reasons. One of them is that you are a proponent of or a consumer of illegal drugs. We know where it's coming from. Why doesn't he stop it? It's easy. Finish the border wall, close up everything except the international ports of entry, and then separate people that probably are not trafficking in these drugs with people who probably are. And if you don't know how to do that, resign to get out of the way of people who can do that. And watch everything that comes in on the international ports of entry. Patrol the rest of the border and arrest anybody, giving them a 5-year felony conviction and then sentence in a federal prison. They'll stop coming. But why does the president believe that could be a bipartisan anything? Why? Because the Republicans are on the same cartel payroll the Democrats are? Because that's another one of the reasons. The other 2 reasons are we want to import terrorists across the southern border. There have been over 100 people on the terrorist watch list that have been arrested at the border. We don't know how many of them got away. And the other one is, okay, so the people leaving the border open are what? Proponents of or consumers of the sex trade, euphemistically called human trafficking? 4 reasons. The border's open. You're a proponent of or a consumer of human trafficking, the sex trade. You are a proponent of or a consumer of the illegal drug trade, which means that you are complicit in the fentanyl deaths of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Americans, 3,000 of them every 10 days. The reason I bring that up is because that was the death toll for, 9/11. We have a 9/11 every 10 days. And the border's still open? You want terrorists into the country? Or you're on a cartel payroll? Those are the only 4 reasons why the border's open. Those are the only 4. So which is it, Mr. President? Which of those is the reason why that border's open? Which of those are you participating in? Considering what I've heard, and okay, I haven't seen any proof, kind of looks to me like maybe the cartel payroll thing is probably the most viable. Once again, I'm not casting aspersions on the President of the United States. But what I am saying is that if he wants some bipartisan help on the opioid front, it's real simple. All you got to do is close the border. The Unity Agenda also focuses on mental health, cancer research, and medical services for veterans. I would say that those are bipartisan issues. Probably won't have an awful lot of trouble with those. Okay? Do whatever you want to do, by all means. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer slammed the GOP agenda while also stating the Democrats are unified ahead of President Biden's 2023 State of the Union address. We are unified here in the Senate as Democrats. House Democrats are pretty unified too, but it's a stark contrast to compare what's going on with House Republicans, said Schumer. Schumer referenced Republicans' days-long feud over who should be the Speaker of the House. Despite taking the chamber, it shows lack of unity. Yeah. Okay. Schumer proceeded to call the situation worrisome and troublesome before stating Republicans can't govern. So Republicans are stuck. They can't govern. They can't agree on anything. Instead, they're focused on political theater. They don't do anything. They're not trying to do anything real. And we hope they won't continue to do this as something as important with the surveillance balloon. Yeah. The Senate Majority Leader also touched on various bipartisan bills passed before saying he's really, really excited about the upcoming 2 years. I'm sure he is. Let's see. The GOP contrasts the majority agenda with President Biden's failed far-left policies ahead of the State of the Union. House Democrats make that House Republicans held a press conference ahead of the Biden State of the Union address tonight, contrasting the majority's agenda to President Biden's failed far-left Democrat policies. The president, quote, must answer for his failed leadership, unquote, said House Conference Chairwoman Elise Stefanik of New York, highlighting the GOP agenda during the first weeks of the 118th Congress. Quote, in just the first weeks, we've reopened the People's House, defended America's energy security, protected the sanctity of life, deferred to Joe Biden's IRS army, put an end to Joe Biden's COVID-19 power grab, and established select committees to address the Chinese Communist Party's malign influence and weaponization of our federal government. The lower chamber Republicans convened ahead of the president's Tuesday address to Congress, vowing to hold the president accountable with their new House majority. They predicted dizzying spin from Biden this evening, bashing his record on the economy, the border crisis, his handling of the Chinese spy balloon that floated across the U.S. in the past week. Let's see. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said yesterday he has no plans to tear up, said today, he has no plans to tear up President Biden's speech, his State of the Union speech. That was a stunt former Speaker Nancy Pelosi pulled at the end of President Trump's final State of the Union speech in 2020. McCarthy will sit with Vice President Kamala Harris behind Biden during the State of the Union address tonight. He tweeted today that a lot of people have been asking if he would repeal Pelosi's move or repeat Pelosi's move from 3 years ago. McCarthy said it won't happen. Quote, I don't believe in the theatrics of tearing up speeches. I respect the other side. I can disagree on policy, but I want to make this country stronger, economically sound, energy independent, secure, and accountable. Good. In 2020, Pelosi stunned millions of viewers by standing up at the end of Trump's remarks and ripping them up. Pelosi and other Democrats were mad because Trump said the U.S. must fight socialism and various left-wing policies. And so she stood up and tore up a speech that talked about defending the nation from socialism. So what does that tell you about the Democrat Party? They're socialists. Okay. Own it. By all means, if you think that that's going to be a winner, by all means, own it. Do it. By all means, do it. Then USA Today is trying to figure out whether or not the President of the United States is going to run for re-election. They say that the State of the Union that the president will give tonight is likely to draw his biggest audience of the year and provide a blueprint for the rest of his presidency, from his stance toward Republicans who have taken control of the House to the political question looming over his future. Is he running for re-election? It's not likely. He's not likely to directly answer that, of course. A formal announcement of his intentions isn't expected till later this month or next. But the balance he strikes between seeking common ground with the GOP and promoting Democrat causes have limited prospects of passage. That will be a clue. Does he sound like a president pushing against the odds to negotiate whatever legislation he can get done in the next 2 years? Yes. Or a candidate rallying partisan troops for the next election day in hopes of improving the landscape down the road? A compromise or a crusader? That's one question that may be answered when he climbs the House dais to address the Congress and the country. There are 4 more. Biden faces the same unhappy situation as his 4 most recent predecessors. The party's unified control of Capitol Hill was lost in midterms, meaning a friendly audience at last year's State of the Union has been replaced by a skeptical one. How will he deal with the new reality? President George W. Bush, who saw his fellow Republicans lose both chambers of the Congress in the 2006 midterms, during his second term was especially gracious in acknowledging a new Speaker of the House. And tonight I have the high privilege and distinct honor of my own as the first president to begin the State of the Union message with these words, Madam Speaker. The chamber erupted in applause for the nation's first female Speaker of the House, Democrat Nancy Pelosi of California, though the cordial opening did not lessen their clashes that followed over the Iraq War. In 2019, President Donald Trump skipped any pleasantries when he delivered the address. After Democrats regained control of the House, Pelosi was once again Speaker. He launched into his remarks without giving her a chance to deliver the traditional welcome. In his speech, he warned Democrats against pursuing ridiculous partisan investigations of him. They investigated him anyway and damaged themselves badly in the process. This year, in the election of the new Speaker, Republican Kevin McCarthy of California wasn't itself historic, except that it took 15 ballots. A modern record, albeit presumably not a distinction he would like to revisit. Given today's polarized politics, President Biden's often stated commitment to bipartisanship, he may choose to do what President Bush did, acknowledge the other side in a way that signals at least the possibility of working together. Let's just kind of join hands again a little bit, Biden told the National Prayer Breakfast on Thursday, the morning after his first White House meeting with McCarthy as Speaker. The president said their meeting had gone well, but in a sign of the times, he felt compelled to add, not a joke. Well, we're going to see what the president is going to say. He faces a conundrum. The president wants to claim credit for near record low unemployment and continued economic growth, but he risks looking out of touch unless he also acknowledges the continued bite of inflation and the real prospect of a recession this year. He's going to say that his economic policies are working great and nothing to worry about. Yeah, well, you've only got a few more months to say that, Mr. President, because this is going to get really exciting really fast. It really is. And let's hope that the Fed is equal to the task of being able to keep this country out of the ditch from a standpoint of economics. It's going to be tough. If you want to talk about bipartisanship and if you want to talk about unity, the bipartisanship and unity responsible for a $32 trillion national debt speaks for itself. How the Treasury is going to handle all that, well, we'll see. We will see. In 2021, his failure to take the threat of inflation more seriously, remember, it was just transitory, nothing to worry about. It cost him his standing on the handling of the economy. He needs to continue to prove to the vast majority of Americans his economic prescriptions are the right direction and are working. This according to Faiz Shakir, a progressive strategist and manager of Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign in 2020. He needs to weave a story about why he does these things. As for President Biden's big task on the speech, Matt Bennett of the moderate Democrat group Third Way responded to sell optimism. Well, that's what Jimmy Carter tried. Remember the malaise speech? That was him trying to say, hey, let's be happier. Well, at the time, we were paying $4 a gallon in gas. and inflation was in double digits. And Mr. President, talking about Carter, once again, out of the question. In a lot of ways, this Biden administration is the second term of Jimmy Carter, except it's been much more destructive. Not necessarily to the nation, but certainly to the people that voted for his opponent in 2020. And yeah, that was ugly and terrible. And it remains ugly and terrible, and I don't think that the people of the United States are going to just set it aside like it was nothing. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining us. See you in just a few. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Do you remember the mistake of changing America's retirement plan from something that was based on more of a reality scenario versus one that was based on an obscure tax rule called 401k? Yeah, that turned America's pension savings over to Wall Street. I disagreed with it. But then again, I disagree with Social Security being based on anything besides treasury bonds. I believe there needs to be a hard linkage between the money that the people of the United States give to the government of the United States, especially where their pensions are involved. There needs to be a hard linkage to reality. That hard linkage is the good faith and credit of the United States of America, represented in treasury bonds. What should happen is that all the money that has been cascading into the general fund of the U.S. government through something called Social Security should be converted to treasury bonds and then reissued to the people that put all that money in. That way, when people do stupid stuff like I'm about to report to you, then what ends up happening is that it actually starts messing with the good faith and credit of the United States government. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. More than 100 conservative leaders and groups organized by former Vice President Mike Pence's political advocacy group are backing a new resolution from Senator Mike Braun. He's a Republican from Indiana, and Representative Andy Barr, a Republican from Kentucky, that would block a move by the Biden administration to promote a woke capital agenda. Last week, every Republican senator and West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin introduced legislation they hoped would terminate a new Department of Labor rule that allows retirement plan managers to factor environment, social, and governance issues into investment decisions. In other words, tying investment decisions not to a fiduciary gain for those people in those retirement plans, but to tie politics into the decision making of those fund managers. This is disastrous. This is disastrous. Environment, social, and governance, ESG, etc. Yeah, they're doing their absolute dead level best to try to tie all that to politics negative. It politicizes the retirement savings for 152 million Americans. Advancing American Freedom Executive Director Paul Teller wrote in a letter first obtained by Fox News Digital, signed by the heads of more than 100 conservative groups, urging Congress to roll back President Biden's politically inappropriate and financially irresponsible rule. According to research from the University of Chicago, so it must be true, mutual funds scoring highly on ESG factors are consistently outperformed by funds rated lowest for ESG, according to the letter. Moreover, 85% of the country does not even know what ESG is and therefore would not be aware of the financial risks their retirement account managers are subjecting them to when they actively pursue ESG investment decisions. A recent study conducted by UCLA and NYU agreed with the findings that while ESG standards are increasingly used by investors and asset managers to guide their decision-making, they often underperform compared to the broader market. The woke capital agenda of the Biden administration needs to be cast aside for common sense policies that protect American retirees, said AAF founder Mike Pence. The American people deserve accountability for their hard-earned savings and reassurance that the encroaching of ESG is overturned. AAF also announced its third Future of Freedom legislative agenda series, which includes targeting ESG and empowering Americans to ensure their retirement plans are well protected. The letter urged Congress to overturn the Biden administration's rule through the Congressional Review Act. Under that law, joint resolutions that disapprove of a regulation must come up for a vote and be used to eliminate regulations if passed by both the House and the Senate. Supporters of the resolution expect at least one more Democrat to support it, according to the allowing it, by the way, to pass in the Senate. We, the undersigned organization and officials, are calling on every member of the United States Congress to support these resolutions and stop President Biden's ideological embezzling of America's retirement accounts. That is not overheated rhetoric. That is absolute truth. And that is something that needs to be taken care of. Absolutely needs to be taken care of. By the way, in case you're wondering, the conservative organizations signing the letter included Heritage Action, America First Policy Institute, Americans for Prosperity, Americans for Tax Reform, Climate Science Coalition of America, Club for Growth, Fair Energy Foundation, Faith and Freedom Coalition, and the Foundation for Government Accountability. The state treasurers of Arizona, Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi, Utah, and West Virginia also signed it. So Republicans and Democrat lawmakers in recent weeks have been targeting the Biden administration's ESG investment priorities. They're warning Americans these priorities may be working against their financial goals. A group of 25 states last month filed a federal lawsuit over the rule. Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes said it would put millions of Americans' safety net retirement plans at risk. He is completely correct. Completely correct. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. That's hour number 2 in the books already. Hour number 2. We got one more hour coming up in just a couple of minutes. I'm very much looking forward to sharing that with you as we continue on this Tuesday afternoon, the 7th of February, year of our Lord 2023. More of the Wells Report is next. All right, darling, so hang on. I shall returneth in just a momenteth, I promiseth. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. On this broadcast, we report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. We make commentary. That's not the news. It's just my opinion. And it's just as valuable as your opinion. So let's talk it over. That's debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. That debate can take place a couple of different ways. You can call me on the telephone, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. If I'm saying it too fast, it's right there on the lower third. The lower third right there of that very fancy graphics package that's beneath my picture here on the Wells Report. So the President of the United States is going to try to do something called a unity agenda. And he has been anything but a unifier in this nation. He has been essentially the divider in chief. No, not my words. But he's trying to figure out some way of coming up with a more bipartisan look at Congress. And the reason is not because he wants to come together for the sake of the nation. It's because he has no chance of passing anything else unless he's able to somehow lure the Republicans into doing what they've always done, which is essentially enable a Democrat policymaking agenda. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a Republican anymore, because we need somebody to fight for the nation. These people have a globalist, communist, socialist ideology that permeates everything they do, up to and including this ESG agenda that we were just discussing, which is forcing people's retirement plans into a circumstance whereby the people actually running the investments to try to build money for those retirement plans only use leftist policy approved companies, and they routinely underperform the broad market. And that is absolutely against all kinds of fiduciary rules. It looks like a swindle to me, and it's something that cannot stand. But nonetheless, the president's going to come up and try to talk about bipartisanship, which in the Democrat lexicon is doing whatever's necessary to get the Republicans to go along with your agenda. And that's it. That's bipartisanship according to them. Leveraging Republicans to do what they want is bipartisanship, as opposed to actually coming together and trying to come up with a compromise bit of legislation that makes sense for everybody. So, how are the Democrats working to try to forward the president's unity agenda? Glad you asked that question. It's the one hanging in the room right now. Republicans on the House Oversight Committee were treated to their Democrat counterparts, accusing them of fueling, quote, white nationalist conspiracy theories. This during a hearing on security at the southern border. The security that is non-existent. That's security, which is nothing more than a vaporous notion that goes along with the idea of Democrats actually trying to seek bipartisan help from Republicans. It just doesn't exist. Republican Chairman James Comer highlighted the tweet, or a tweet at the beginning of the hearing, which features Border Patrol agents and is on the, quote, front lines of the border crisis. The House Oversight Committee Democrats said this: good morning and good luck to everyone except GOP oversight members who are using today's hearing to amplify white nationalist conspiracy theories ahead of a comprehensive solution to protect our borders and strengthen our immigration system. That was the tweet. Doesn't look like there's a whole lot of unity there. Looks to me like it's Democrats saying, you know, we don't care that you have a majority. We're just going to stomp you into the dust anyway. Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, that was the tweet. While vigorous disagreement is part of the legislative process, members are reminded that we must adhere to established standards of decorum and debate. Well, no. Decorum and debate in the current lexicon of the United States Congress is what socialist Democrat thuggery dictates decorum and debate should be. And that is all. It's a violation of House rules and the rules of this committee to engage in personalities regarding other members or to question the motives of a colleague. So remarks of the type that we just saw in the tweet are not permitted by the rules and not in keeping with the best traditions of the committee. Representative Byron Donalds, the Republican from Florida, then weighed in with his opposition to the tweet in question. He continued, "My colleagues on the other side of the aisle who want to state that we're using this hearing for white nationalism, I'm not doing that." He continued, "So if you feel that strongly, come to this side of the room and let's talk about it face to face. Only that kind of silly stuff for somebody else. Don't bring that here today. This stuff is serious." Yeah, you're damn right it's serious. Every 10 days, we have a 9/11 death toll courtesy of fentanyl. There's no need to worry about some kind of a comprehensive immigration anything. What has to happen is we have to close that border. Now. We have to close that border and then figure out what to do after we close it. Simply close it. Turn away everyone. If you are trying to seek political asylum from Mexico, go to a near port of entry and we'll talk to you. But if you're trying to, say, for example, declare political asylum from, say, for example, Nicaragua, you're in Mexico. Declare your wish for asylum in Mexico. They can do that, Yeah. The hearing on the crisis at the border, which saw more than 2.3 million migrant encounters in fiscal year 2022, and more than 251,000 in December alone, a brand new record. The hearing features two Border Patrol Chief Patrol agents. Chief Patrol Agent John Maudlin leads the agency in the Tucson sector. Chief Patrol Agent Gloria Chavez runs the agency in the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley. It is one of a number of hearings held or being planned by Republicans in the House. Republicans have sought to pin blame for the crisis on the policies of the Biden administration. Democrats in the White House have accused Republicans of blocking an immigration reform plan they say would overhaul a broken system. Republicans balked at the plan to use due to inclusion of a mass amnesty for millions of illegal immigrants already in the country. Here's the simple case of the matter. Close the border. If you want the border open, come to the discussion with reality as opposed to political hopes and dreams and delirium. Come with solutions. Don't come with another way of exploiting the border for your political toys. Solve the problem. Don't exploit it. It's outrageous that we're having this discussion. 3,000 people, a 9/11 death toll every 10 days because of fentanyl. And either the fentanyl comes directly from China or the fentanyl comes from the precursor materials from China sent to Mexico where it's assembled into fentanyl. You know what I would do? If I was the president of the United States, I'd call President Lopez Obrador on the phone and I'd say, "Hey, Lopi, it's JD. Listen, all those factories you got in Mexico that are turning the Chinese precursor chemicals into fentanyl, I'll tell you what we're going to do. You're going to close them. You're going to close them. You're going to put them out of business. You're going to confiscate all of those chemicals, and you're going to close them. Or we're going to send an alpha strike into your country, and we're going to blow those freaking buildings to smithereens. You choose." My God, that's an act of war. Yes, it is an act of war. I'm going to, before I send the planes in, if you decide not to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go before the United Nations and I'm going to claim that you are a narco-terrorist state responsible for the importation of fentanyl into our country, which kills 3,000 people every 10 days. Make your decision. Either you close those buildings down and, oh, by the way, destroy them, or we'll do it for you. You take your pick. That's what I would do. That's what I would do. Because that's where those chemicals are put together. That's where fentanyl is created. In Mexico? Excuse me? And oh, by the way, the cartels want to get all upset and everything like that because we're poking holes in their business model? Okay, no problem. I'll just call President Obrador one more time. Hey, Lopi, JD again. Yeah, that was impressive, wasn't it? Yeah, the bricks from those buildings. Did you see that? We got one measured at 21 miles. Wasn't that impressive? Yeah. Listen, your cartel buddies, the guys that send you checks every month. Yeah, they're trying to create problems in our country. So remember when I told you that we were going to come in and destroy the buildings making fentanyl and so on? Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to target all of the houses, all the properties, all the yachts, all of everything that all of these drug lords have, and we're going to start putting airstrikes on every single one of them. Every single one. Or you can do it, but we know where they are, and we're expecting to see all of them burned to ashes, blown to smithereens. And if you want to call them up on the telephone and say, hey, all your properties are about to become rubble, we don't care. Go right ahead. Because I know they're paying you, so go ahead and earn that money. Get away from the house. Get your kids away from the house. Get your wife away from the house. Get everything that you think is valuable away from the house because it's going to cease to exist in 35 minutes. Enough's enough. I've had enough. I have had enough of Mexican government duplicity. I've had enough of this ridiculous foolishness that somehow Mexico can use the border of the United States to export its poverty class so it doesn't have to deal with it. I'm infuriated as hell that they let people that are trying to seek political asylum all the way through their country without giving them political asylum, expecting the United States to do it. What a crock of garbage. And so the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, when we're talking about closing down the border, talk about the Republicans pursuing a white nationalist agenda. Yeah, what would I do if I was on the House Oversight Committee? Yeah, I would give them the bare minimum, and that would be that. I wouldn't respond to anything they say except if matters of order. I just wouldn't interact with them because they're animals. That's all they are. White nationalists. Calling those guys, the Republicans on that committee, white nationalists. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172 on the chat room. Ann is asking whether or not she believes that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve will be filled back up after President Biden has seen fit to release millions upon millions of barrels of oil from that reserve for reasons of politics. And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. One of the things that really was brilliant that President Trump did with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was after opening up American energy production to the highest level it's ever seen, indeed making the United States an independent oil producer, energy producer. What ended up happening was that after the world oil price collapsed, he refilled the Strategic Petroleum Reserves with much less expensive oil. It was a brilliant move. Now, I don't expect that we'll ever be able to see something like that again, unless, of course, President Trump is President Trump once again in 2024, 25, actually. I don't expect that to happen again, but you never know. But yeah, it will be refilled. Max responds to Ann by saying, I would hope that the reserves would be replaced, but we need to stop shipping out reserves, selling them, or giving them away. The president, in my opinion, is in the back pocket of Chinese and the Russians. Well, it's a real hard argument that he isn't. It's a real hard argument to try to make that President Biden is not beholden to China in some way. And every time he doesn't take harsh reactions to Chinese provocations, makes it even more serious. Welcome to the Wells Report. Hi, who's this? Hang on a second. Wait a minute. Stand by. What did you say?
Dexter and Jessica and Easton.
Okay, so it's Dexter, Jessica, and Easton. And those are people that I know and love very much. How's it going, you guys? Welcome to the Wells Report. Good to have you here.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Katie. Happy birthday to you. And many more on Channel 4 before you snore.
Thank you so much. How sweet of you. That is so nice. Thank you. By the way, we will be celebrating my birthday this Thursday night at a place called the Dream Tacos in Bedford. The band that I'm in, the traditional blues band, will be playing, and I'm going to be playing drums there. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope I get to see you guys there. Are you going to come?
I think I will. The kids have karate, but maybe I can get them out of karate for one night.
No, I don't think that's a no, don't do that. No, just yeah, Easton showed up last time in with ear protection on, and I'm sitting there going, well, we weren't playing that loud. That's thing number one.
It was pretty good. The level was
fine. Jessica, thank you very much. How sweet of you.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
I'll look forward to it. Thanks for the call.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye-bye. So, yes, indeed, it is my birthday. Yeah, thank you, Alicia. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was I was born 65 years ago today. I never thought I'd be this old. The reason I never thought I'd be this old is because I was pretty sure that I was going to drive race cars as fast as they could be driven for most of my life. But I realized I had family responsibilities that I had to take care of first. And that involved raising 4 sons, which I was successful in doing. Yeah. Thank you so much. So that being said, I sincerely appreciate being able to sit here and say thank you for that beautiful song on my 65th birthday. Wow. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. It happened a very, very long time ago. Some 30 years ago, actually. It was eye-watering then. It turned out to be a monstrous money-getting grab of federal dollars by the nation's schools. It was the craze that all of our children, for some reason, in less than, say, one generation, all became saturated with attention deficit disorder. Attention deficit disorder, in other words, there's a disorder because a little kid can't pay attention, can't focus. There are kids that I grew up with that were hyperactive, and they were loose cannons. There was like one or two of them in my entire school career. And by the time they got to the point where they were in junior high school, pretty much they'd figured out what they needed to do to keep them happy. But the rest of us, if there was any kind of a lack of attention, it had to do strictly with the fact that we were dealing with a self-discipline crisis. I mean, there was a heading on my report cards that was listed self-discipline. And believe me, if I was having trouble with self-discipline, both my teachers and my parents made sure that I received discipline necessary to develop my own. So when a little kid was being obnoxious, we'd have a conversation out in the hallway that usually involved getting slapped a couple of times with a flyback paddle on your fanny while all of your friends nervously laughed because they could be next. Strangely enough, that happened a few times, and pretty soon you stop being an obnoxious jerk. I mean, if you really, really screwed up, they took you to the principal's office, and he got the big paddle out, and he really let you have it. And thereby having a peaceful way of doing that. But then all of a sudden people said, my God, we can't do that. My gosh, we just can't do this corporal punishment thing. We can't do corporal punishment because it traumatizes the kids. So what we ended up doing was we ended up taking away all of the discipline in schools. So suddenly the problem of attention deficit disorder became a catastrophe, became an epidemic. And suddenly we had to get these kids to doctors to make sure that they were on drugs that turned them into little zombies. And that's exactly what happened. It would be years later that I found out from a teacher that, oh, by the way, whenever we, the teachers of your kids, were able to successfully get somebody into the ADHD program, federal dollars poured into that particular school to help those poor downtrodden little kids, which I consider to be monstrous. I think I still do. But instead of stomping on these teachers for diagnosing children and basically practicing medicine without a license, by first removing any kind of shred of a demand for proper behavior and discipline in the schools in favor of not doing anything that would traumatize them in any way, shape, or form, which, by the way, led to police officers throwing kids around rooms, handcuffing them, and taking them out of school. You suppose that might be just a little more traumatic than getting a couple of whacks on the butt with a little bitty paddle? So we should have sued all these people. All of these people that decided, these educators, it's not all on teachers, by the way. It's not all on teachers. Okay? They said, teachers just flat said, we're not responsible for disciplining your kids. Oh, yes, you are. And if you can't do it, get out of the way of people who can. Okay? My history teacher, my it was U.S. history, Mr. Harris, pulled out a Maori killing club. It was the heaviest wood I'd ever seen. And put it on his desk and said, don't make me use this. Did we have any problems in the class? No. No. And we all got A's. All of us. It was amazing. Anyway, so the way this works is that we set our kids up for failure. And like I said, we should have stomped it right out of these people, all these quote unquote educators, back when ADHD was the thing, because now what they're doing is now they're able to, say, for example, diagnose our kids with gender dysphoria. You know, the difference between ADHD and gender dysphoria, there's a lively debate as to whether or not ADHD drugs like Ritalin sort of curtailed the growth curves of kids that were on them. It'll stunt your growth. Well, actually it did. We took Corey off of those darn drugs, and he grew almost a foot in one summer that we had him. It was probably just a coincidence. Yeah, and so anyway, so what we do now is we have kids that are being diagnosed with gender dysphoria. They believe for whatever reason there's some other gender because somebody has this idea of saying, I think you have a problem, ma'am or sir, depending on whether you're a ma'am or sir. If you are a ma'am, then you're a sir. And if you're a sir, then you're a ma'am. And this all happens during puberty when kids are as confused as they possibly could be. You know what that looks like to me? That looks like exploitation to me. But that's another fight. We'll have that some other time. The difference between Ritalin, spending a little bit of time taking a drug that may make you a little bit shorter, and gender dysphoria is that before you know it, you got teachers that are working around their parents without their knowledge, changing pronouns, encouraging cross-dressing, and working their way into a circumstance where kids are surgically altered for the rest of their life to satisfy some strange political agenda from people that don't meet the kids, don't meet the teachers, don't have anything to do with the specifics of this particular evil. They just hold the strings from far away and don't really care about what the actual outcomes are. But if you step over some of their lines, suddenly you become the biggest criminal in the history of the world. You get stomped on, you get embarrassed, you get screwed up, et cetera, et cetera. It's called canceling. So now what we have is this problem where kids are being convinced that they're not boys and girls, but they are actually girls and boys. Or maybe they're not either. Stupid. And somebody noticed. Oklahoma GOP Governor Kevin Stitt is calling on Oklahoma lawmakers to deliver a bill to his desk that, quote, bans all gender transition surgeries for minors, unquote. You know, what you do after you're 18 is your business. It's your business. But what happens to your body before even the age of consent, which is in most cases 17, sometimes it's 18? Well, that's the business of the parents. And to a lesser degree, the teachers. But these teachers going around parents to play gender confusion games with these children, they should go to jail. They should go to jail. By the way, gender transition surgeries, I hope, includes puberty blocking drugs. No, you don't get to do that either. Governor Stitt said, quote, we must protect our most vulnerable, our children, explaining that minors can't vote, can't purchase alcohol, can't purchase cigarettes. But for some reason, we should allow a minor to have a permanent gender-altering surgery in Oklahoma. That's why I'm calling on the legislature to send me a bill that bans all gender transition surgeries and hormone therapies, good, on minors in this state. As governor, Stitt vowed to never shy away from calling out right from wrong and said that he will not be intimidated by partisan interest groups or make decisions based on group think. Good for him. Stitt's comments align with a pledge he made last fall to prevent Oklahoma minors from undergoing life-changing gender surgeries in the state. We have a duty to protect minors from a lot of things. We don't let them drink. We don't let them get tattoos. Their brains are not fully developed. This is not something we're going to allow to be done to minors and use taxpayer dollars. Good heavens. Stitt, who consistently touted the state's belief in traditional family values, told Fox News last year that healthy children being permanently altered either through hormone therapy or some other kind of surgery is just not going to happen in Oklahoma. Good. First elected in 2018, Stitt said yesterday that he addressed state lawmakers that he will continue my responsibility to lead, not follow. Last April, Stitt made headlines after he signed a measure to ban non-binary gender markers on birth certificates. Sorry, can't do it. You either are a boy or a girl. Biology assigns that to you. Politics does not. In addition, Stitt, a month prior in 2022, signed a bill prohibiting transgender girls from playing on female sports teams, one of many such bans being signed into law across the country. Other conservative states, Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee, Texas, have passed laws prohibiting gender-confirming treatments for minors. Gender-confirming. You take a kid that is identified as being confused about their gender, and then you make the decision for them and call it gender confirmation. Based on what? Based on the fact that you teach 6th grade mathematics? That's what you're basing your decision on? You're basing it on what? Psych 101? Oh, no, all the way to Psych 201, huh? Show me your degree in child psychology, and by God, you better have one, because if you don't, you're about to need a lawyer. This is monstrous. It's good to know that somebody's doing something about it. Are there people who have gender dysphoria? Yes, there are. Is it a serious problem? Yes. Is it a problem that has to be discussed and manicured, even rooted for in our schools? No. Is it something that should make it possible for biological boys to hang around with biological girls? And why, by the way, one other little problem that I have, how come it's not biological girls hanging around with biological boys in the men's room? It's always the other way around. Why is that? Huh. Yeah, this is all garbage. 100% rotting, filthy garbage. Now, am I saying that LGBTQ people are rotten, filthy garbage? Absolutely not. Not in any way, shape, or form. I'd never say anything like that at all. I'm just saying, oh, by the way, you need to remember something that's really important. The age of consent in Texas is 17. You get my kids playing around with cross-dressing and makeup and all that kind of stuff before the age of 17, you're grooming my child. And I'm going to see you're thrown in jail. And you will knock it off immediately. And that these politicians haven't made that absolutely abundantly clear and solved all of this already. What are you guys waiting for? Did Governor Stitt have to actually have that speech? Or should it have been taken care of just as a matter of course by all thinking people? But then again, do we actually have thinking people in the political process in the United States? Yes, we do have thinking people in the government of the United States and our various states. We do. But they're not thinking with their brains, they're thinking with their politics. And that's a completely different process. And it's exquisitely dang dangerous, especially when you start altering the bodies surgically of little kids that aren't old enough to vote. Just plain monstrous. It's a bridge too far. It is my hope that indeed this comes to an end quickly. This is something that is a loser for everyone, but the biggest losers are the kids. You don't get to mess with our kids until they're 18. You just don't. After they're age 18, that's fine if you want to. But let me just tell you, until that point, you're committing a crime. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. You may have noticed something missing on the Wells Report. It was something that was, shall we say, done on purpose. You will note that I spend an awful lot of time reporting news. I don't spend an awful lot of time reporting non-news. One of the interesting things that was non-news just recently was the Grammy Award. The Grammy Awards. The Grammy Awards are like every other award show. They have been turned into essentially an opportunity for people who really don't have a lot of things to say or things that they believe are absolutely essential to American culture that have nothing to do with American culture. They have strictly to do with politics and political leanings and the exploitation of various groups, various divisions for the sake of politics. And one of the persons that is responsible, or at least has a role in that, is the funniest human being on the planet. His name is Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle just took a Grammy Award for the best comedy album. And when I say that Dave Chappelle is the funniest human being on the earth, it's because he is the funniest human being on earth. And the entire leftist Hollywood cabal of I don't know what kind of people immediately started talking about how Dave Chappelle is transphobic and terrible and awful and rotten. Yeah. And they're doing their absolute dead level best to cancel Dave Chappelle. And Dave has some words for those folks, and I thought you'd like to hear just a few of them.
I'm not even mad that they take issue with my work. Good, fine. What I take issue with is the idea that because they don't like it, I'm not allowed to say it. Art is a nuanced endeavor. I have a belief that they are trying to take the nuance out of speech in American culture, that they're making people speak as if they're either on the right or the left. Everything seems absolute, and any opinion I respect is way more nuanced than these binary choices that they keep putting in front of us. I don't see the world in red or blue. It's just people I agree with on some things, but not other things. It's just what it is.
Yeah, and this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. Dave Chappelle is an amazingly brilliant man. Like many of the world's greatest comedians, he does say things that are epically funny. And the reason he does it is because the things he's talking about are indeed epically funny. They simply are. And that's why he keeps getting these. Chappelle's win at the 2023 Grammy Awards for Best Comedy Album sparked an almost immediate backlash. Dave Chappelle wins Grammy for Netflix special condemned for being transphobic. That was the Hollywood Reporter. Another outlet, The Advocate, claimed that Chappelle's 2021 comedy special, The Closer, has been widely called out for its transphobic material. Some commentators mocked the biased framing around Chappelle's Grammy win. I'm shocked they made this a category, but I mean, who else was going to win it? Said Atlantic writer Ed Zitron, joking in a tweet that went viral with 115,000 likes and more than 6.6 million views. One user wrote back, with a few more awards, Dave Chappelle could go out for the coveted Bigot Award, which is just heavy-handed garbage. Dave Chappelle isn't a bigot. Dave Chappelle's a comedian. He makes us laugh. And if you can listen to what Dave Chappelle says about almost anything and not laugh, it's because for whatever reason you've traded your sense of humor for the lofty post of being a political sociopath. In other words, you're putting your politics in front of your humanity. Dave Chappelle was talking about this, and he says, I'll talk to anybody about these specials if they would just listen and watch the entire special before we talk. So far, nobody's taken him up on it. Chappelle's comedy special, The Closer, premiered on Netflix in October 2021. It was the subject of attacks from the LGBT community who said it was transphobic. Isn't that fantastic? The people who are supposedly aggrieved are the people defining what aggrievement there is. In other words, they're defining their own terms of being able to call somebody a bigot based on what they think of what their particular agreed situations are. One of the things about the race unrest in the 60s is that everybody could plainly see just exactly what was going on in the United States of America. That bigotry wasn't defined by the people that were the subject of it. It was being defined by good sense and reality. That's not what's happening here. This has been the Wells Report. I hope you enjoy it. Congratulations, Dave Chappelle. I hope you win a lot more of those. Back with more tomorrow right here. This has been the Wells Report. All right, my friends. God bless all y'all. Thank you very much. And thanks for the birthday wishes. That was so sweet. So sweet. I should ask him to be on the Wells Report. Yes, I absolutely should have Dave Chappelle on the Wells Report, but he's a busy dude. Maybe I can get him on. Maybe I can talk to him. We'll see. So anyway, I'm going to run on now. Don't forget what we're going to be doing on Thursday. We're celebrating my birthday at the Dream Tacos in Bedford, Texas. My band is going to be playing, and it's not my band, it's Randy Floyd's band, but I play drums in it. So we'll be playing, and I hope to see you there, okay? So God bless you and all like you, and I will see you tomorrow. Until then, have a safe evening. Enjoy yourself. Bye-bye.